Hi, my name is Omar. This is my Adun Oakenshield deck that I'll be displaying here for you on this deck tech. Here's my Adun Oakenshield deck. It's pretty much a reanimator style deck, but there's a lot of tricks to it, a lot of other interactions going on. The general is a pimped out general done by Mr. Fridays on Twitter. A really nice guy who helped hook me up with the deck, hook me up with the general, excuse me, because with the deck all foiled out, I wanted to have the general pimped out as well. As we go to the lands, I guess I'll tell you a little about the deck. Basically, the deck does some reanimator tricks later on in the game. The early game tries to ramp out. And just stay with the other decks. Oftentimes it starts out pretty slow unless I get a very early Primeval Titan or one or two early other tricks going on in the deck, but then later on in the mid game and later on in the game it really catches up and can take over the game pretty quickly, especially when it's been ignored. Most of my play groups don't ignore me anymore, so it makes the deck harder to play, but I've had to build other interactions into the deck so that I can continue to stay up with the game and stay up with the 3- and 4-man pods that I get into. Most of the early lands are pretty basic, just on-color lands and dual lands and bounce lands and such, so that I can smooth out my mana base and be able to cast whatever I need to. I kept the snow covered simply because a little later you'll see that I'm running a Mouth of Ronom, which allows me to deal with 4 toughness creatures on the board without having to spend a spell, just to land, and usually by that time it's not a big deal. First card here is Mosswort Bridge. It's really useful, especially when I fetch it with Primeval Titan. It usually gets me a pretty good spell to cast later on in the game when I have 10 power on the board, which isn't too hard for my deck. Winding Canyon's a pretty well-known land, which lets you play its creatures as instants as long as you activate it. For 2, very useful. Bojuka Bog, obviously, to help deal with other people's graveyards, which I've had to do repeatedly, and in EDH you just have to be ready for. As I mentioned before, Mouth of Ronom would let you deal with 4 toughness creatures without really spending a spell. Boseiju, when I'm in the middle of a bunch of blue decks and I really need to be able to cast some sorceries or instants, Boseiju just really helps me out in that regard. It's easy to fetch with Primeval Titan, or sometimes I'll just tutor when I need to. Diamond Valley, not too many people will know the card, but it's useful for keeping up my life, and since I do reanimation style tricks, Diamond Valley and creature regaining some life and then buying it back, it's very easy for me to do, and it really helps me stay up. Everyone will know Cabal Coffers. That combined with Orborg a little later on will just help me make ridiculous amounts of mana in the middle and later in the game to do some really insane stuff. Reliquary Tower, because there are times where I have so many cards in hand that when I want to keep them, I certainly don't want to dump them. And that obviously lets me keep my hand full. Orborg, as I mentioned before, combined with Coffers, just really stupid amounts of mana. This is a dangerous land. It's usually good to get rid of. Most people don't. Low-Ash Stronghold, again, a way for me to buy back creatures from the graveyard and redraw them when I need them. Some early mana acceleration, mana Crypt, which a lot of times I can first turn cultivate right off a force and mana Crypt and get ahead right away. Soul Ring, same thing, early acceleration. No stranger to anyone, Kozilek, which later on I can just play straight out and draw a bunch of cards. Or sometimes I can sneak attack him, which is one of the main tricks in the deck, and just wipe out some opponent's permanents. Especially if I get sneak attack down early, I can pretty much end the game for them right away. Primeval Titan, absolutely no stranger to anyone in EDH. If you see a green deck that isn't running it, and that person just can't afford the card, they probably should pick it up, or they're playing elves. Malera, one of the little combo tricks in the deck. Malera, along with Woodfall Primus, and you'll see Greater Good. I can just blast out every non-creature permanent on the table and pretty much end games right away. Oracle of Mul Daya, which lets me play lands quickly, no stranger to anybody. Solemn Simulacrum, again, he just goes and dies for the cause, gets me a card, gets me some land, very useful. Kagamaru, which is a great target for reanimation, rather underrated, I think. And being able to kill a bunch of creatures on the board, and when I can reanimate them and bring it right back and do it again, it's very useful. Sometimes it's better than Wrath, simply because there are a lot of creatures who, won't die to Wrath or can be easily removed from Wrath. This is something you can do with instant speed and force someone to really have to play around it. Massacre Wurm, another card that's no stranger to most newer players. Massacre Wurm combined with Kagamaru can be a real beating for some decks, especially some decks that produces mass amount of tokens. You just kill their tokens, kill their board, and kill them really quickly. Woodfall Primus, as I mentioned earlier, Malira is just a beating. I mean, on his own is a beating. I've had games, even without Malira on the play, where in 2 turns I've played him, sacked him, reanimated him, played him again, like 5, 6, 7. Actually, in 2 turns I had it happen 11 times to one player. He was not happy. Paternal Witness, obviously, buyback cards from graveyard, very useful. Godo, very powerful creature that Sean McEwen hit me to and got me to get in the deck. Lets me tutor out some very useful equipments. Nim Death Mantle, which is again really good with Woodfall Primus, good with a bunch of other creatures in the deck you see. Also, sort of Feast of Famine, another very powerful, letting me untap, being able to play more spells, or just help me take over a game pretty quickly. Seedguide Ash, which is not a heavily used card in EDH. Some green decks will use it, but I think its power is really underestimated. Being able to sack it with the ways that I can between Diamond Valley, Greater Good, a few other methods. I mean, Momentous Fall. I can easily get more lands on the table really quickly. Sometimes gain life. I mean, it's a lot of power for one card. Geth. Surprisingly, as much as Geth is very useful, I don't get to play it as much as I'd like to. But sometimes it's just better to pitch to survival and get something that wins me the game right there. But if he hits the table and I get to use him, other players really have a bad time, because I'll just pull some of the best stuff in the yard, and there's not much they can do about it. Anger, letting all my creatures swing in with haste. If Anger hits the table and not the graveyard, then I'm often doing it wrong. But on occasion, he actually does hit the table just because I need a way to kill him, and I have a way to kill him on board and not in hand. Terracodon, again, no surprise, being able to blow up permanents. Very important EDH in the later games, because sometimes your permanents you've got to find ways to deal with, or you just lose, and he does that pretty nicely. Ulamog, again, cast him, destroy a permanent, or sometimes just sneak attack him and wipe out somebody's board. Oftentimes I use that combined with Momentous Fall, draw 11 cards, gain 11 life. It seems pretty good. 10 life, excuse me. Puppeteer Clique. A lot of times you find other players play some really powerful creatures, or will dump really powerful creatures and lose them early to various wrath effects or what have you. Puppeteer Clique will punish them for that. You get those creatures, make use of them, get rid of them from the game, so they can't harass you anymore. Very powerful effect. Well, I'll show both. Duplicant, obviously doing his thing, removing creatures from the game. Very important. Sometimes they're just creatures you cannot deal with unless you can just get rid of them, and Duplicant handles all that. Myogen, sometimes in the later game, he is so important. Other decks have really powerful card advantage, and despite all the tricks I put in this deck, sometimes you just fall behind on cards. Being able to play Myogen and force the other players to dump their hand really sits them back and lets you come back and or even win the game right there. A big game hunter, he has a lot of uses. I mean, there are plenty of decks out there that play 4 power and greater creatures that you really need to just be able to get rid of, and sometimes being able to just play him, or even better, pitch him to survival and play him for madness, just really upsets other players. You kill their card, you kill that creature and get a card from him. Very useful. Squee, he is there simply for the survival engine and nothing else. On occasion, he is a 1/1 blocker who dies for the cause and comes back to your hand if you're really that far behind and need that blocker. Fleshbag Marauder, again, sometimes you have players who play a limited amount of creatures and you can't really deal with them, can't target them, but you can get him to sack him, and he's very useful for that. Him combined with Death Mantle is a beating. I've had one game where I will bring him back 4 times within Death Mantle and wipe out another player's board, and they're just looking at me like, really? And I'm like, yeah, really? Wormcrawl Engine, sometimes you just need someone to gain life for, and that's what he's there for. He helps me to gain life. If I have no sack outlets for life gain or anything like that, he just hits the table, and if he blocks a turn or just hits for a turn, I'm back up on life, and he's very useful that way. Corrosive Tusker has rarely ever hit the board, but he is powerful. He fetches you a land, gets you a card. He's a wonderful creature to cycle. On occasion, if I have to, I will reanimate him back up, or necromancy him back up, sack him with greater good, and draw some more cards. He's a very useful tool in this deck, but not often for beating, but often for card advantage. Deadwood Treefolk, again, I'm trying to live out of my graveyard half the time, so when he hits the table, I can buy back something from the graveyard. That's card advantage for me. He's a solid blocker. He can die later to a number of effects like gain me life or draw me cards and get me another creature from my graveyard. He's very powerful in that respect. Hellkite Charger, him with Bear Umbra just ends games. Sneak attack him in, put on Bear Umbra, swing in, and if no one has an answer, the table is dead. Because I just hit and untap, hit, untap, hit, untap, and combo kill the table. Demonic Tutor, no stranger to anyone playing EDH. This just gets me the best card I need for the situation. Beast Within, again, permanent sometimes you need to be able to deal with, and Beast Within does the job. It's a sick card for green, and if you're not running it in any green-based deck, you really should be. Greater Good, again, all my creatures at some point or another will die to Greater Good just to draw me cards, and it's very useful, especially if they're going to die anyway. It's even better for me, and this is a permanent that players have to handle and have to deal with when it hits the table. Otherwise, I'm just going to win the game. Sylvan Library, sometimes you need that. You need to be able to look through your top cards of your deck, get some more cards in hand, and for the cost of some life, you can actually get more than one card in your hand. Sylvan Library is very useful. Reanimate, sometimes it's creatures I need to bring back, and the life doesn't matter because I need to be able to win or survive right there on the spot. Reanimate does that. Tooth and Nail, don't really have a combo kill for Tooth and Nail. Tooth and Nail is really there sometimes to just get me answers for whatever the situation is at the time. I didn't want to play any kind of combo that worked off a Tooth and Nail because it's a pretty easy way to win, and a lot of decks do it in a lot of other colors. And I probably could have come up with something that does it in these colors also, but there didn't really seem to be a need for it. I just wanted to run Tooth and Nail because sometimes you need to get the best creatures out and survive, and you can still win off of it, but it's not really so much a combo win as is a finding the cards, finding answers to win. It's not a straight combo. There's never any two specific cards I get. Decree of Pain is very useful, especially its cycling ability. I actually had Overwhelming Forces in the deck for a while, but I found Decree of Pain was just better because Decree of Pain will wipe out everything, not just one player, and draws me a lot more cards most times. Damn Tutor, again, getting that answer in the turn that you need to draw right away is very useful. Chaos Warp, being able to deal with permanents on the board, again, very useful. Sneak Attack, this is the other card altered by Mr. Fridays for my deck. Sneak Attack, obviously on the table, very powerful, lets me play out my creatures really quick, and especially some of the ones that can come back with Persist, even better for me because I'll still get the creature and get their effect twice. Whirly Tutor, again, I have creatures I need to get, and Whirly Tutor does that for me. Momentous Fall, card I mentioned before, will gain me life, will draw me cards, puts my creatures in the bin. Very useful, and being able to do it at instant speed as answers to any sort of wrath effects, or someone tries to steal my creature or remove them from the game, what have you, it's even better. Scroll Rack, obviously very powerful when I'm lucky enough to play it early, or sometimes later on when I draw a bunch of cards, but they're not exactly the best cards. Being able to Scroll Rack them away for a fresh hand, very powerful. Phyrexian Arena, obviously drawing another second card a turn is very helpful. Oblivion Stone, sometimes you just got to wipe the board, and Oblivion Stone definitely takes care of that. Necromancy, very powerful card. I think it's somewhat underrated at times. Not only being able to get any creature from the graveyard, but being able to do it at instant speed is very helpful. Sometimes you just need an answer, and it's in a graveyard somewhere, and this running it at instant speed, sure, the creature dies later on, dies after instant speed, but sometimes you just need a blocker, or you just need some effect that you need a creature for, and Necromancy takes care of that. Garruk is a recent addition. Sometimes I find that I'll just play Garruk with a bunch of large creatures on the board and use -3 right away and draw 5, 6, 8, 9, 11 cards, whatever, depends on the size of the creature on the board. Him on the board with Sneak Attack, but let me Sneak Attack on a huge creature and draw a load of cards, and it's really kind of sickening. Yawgmoth Will, pretty much no stranger to anybody. Being able to play out of my graveyard, especially in the mid-game when I have a bunch of cards in my yard and I've got Urborg, Cabal Coffers, and a bunch of mana, is just ridiculous. I can play a bunch of stuff right away. Sword of Feast of Famine, again, Sword on a creature means I get to untap. Sword on Hellkite Charger, if I was able to pay his first time, it's a good game. Vidalcan Orrery, sometimes I need to be able to play at instant speed. Having gone through a lot of the cards, you see so many of them are sorceries and not too many instants. So being able to play end-of-turn creatures and untapping and swinging with them right away, or any sorts of effects that are, and I only play at sorcery speed, this card helps me get there. Regrowth, usually doing the job of getting back stuff from my graveyard. Top, everyone knows top. Sometimes it slows down games, but sometimes you just need to look and see what's there. Nim Deathmantle, another powerful card for me, as I mentioned before. Being able to kill my creatures through sneak attack or what have you, and then pay for them and bring it right back from the yard to get whatever effect again, or just get them back on the field. Very powerful. Beseech the Queen, another tutor. No surprise that the deck runs tutors. Sometimes you just need them. Makes it mad again. Getting creatures back from my yard and getting back into play. Very powerful. I don't care if we target them because my creatures are there to die for me anyway. Cross from Grip. Split second enchantment artifact answer. Kodama's Reach, just mana ramp. Pernicious Deed. Sometimes you gotta wipe the table, so that's there for that. Sneak Attack, probably the most powerful card in my deck. Being able, I'm sorry, I think it's Sneak Attack, Survival of the Fittest. Sometimes being able to play Survival of the Fittest with some cards in my hand to pitch is just the best for me, because not only do I get to filter out my deck, I get to get the situational creature that I need at the time, and this card unanswered will win me the game. It's very rare that I can get Survival down and not win the game at that point. Sark and Vol, I think a rather underrated planeswalker. Sometimes being able to steal someone else's creature and swing in with them is very powerful. It's helped me to take over games really quickly, and unanswered, being able to do that twice is even worse for my opponents. Wheel of Fortune, sometimes I'm low card hand, or sometimes someone else has a lot of cards in hand. Being able to make them throw those cards away and just draw 7 is extremely powerful. Corpse Dance, this is a very tricky card to play. I obviously have to worry about what's on top of what creatures on top of my library. But when I can play it and when I do play it, it's extremely powerful, because sometimes the creature that most recently died is one that someone had to deal with. So being able to bring it back again and force them to deal with it again, especially if I have a sack outlet for it, just to get them into play for the effect and be able to keep the creature later, is extremely powerful. And being able to buy it back is just card advantage for me. Sudden Spoiling, be able to deal with some of those creatures at instant speed so that they can't hurt me, or being able to kill them or keep them from saving their creatures in some way. It's a very powerful card. Bear Umbra, as I mentioned before, Bear Umbra on Hellkite Charger would just win games, but on sometimes just being able to play it and keep a creature alive and being able to untap is very useful. And finally, Slaughter Pack, being able to pay instant speed, and not have to pay mana is very important. You're watching CMDR Decks. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel and check out all the deck videos.